Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanacharyamu Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha. Thank you. Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanacharyamu Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Par Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Charja Asto Tarasata Shri Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Hare Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBD Founder-Acharya Save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Asto Tarasata Shri Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavindaki Namacharya Shri Hare Rasta Kuriki Premsaka Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Hari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Sri Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunigiri Govardhana Ki Brajbhumi Shri Vrindavan Ki Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Purushottam Chacha Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Gangamai Ki Jamunamai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Maharani Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo, all glory to some devotees, 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 Sri Guru and Sri Garanga, all glory to Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Vishnu Padai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ya Svatmanidam Nija Mayayapitam Ya Svatmanidam Nija Mayapitam Ya Svatmanidam Nija Mayayapitam Kvachid Vibatam Kwa Cha Tat Tirohitam Kvachid Vibatam Kwa Cha Tat Tirohitam Kvachid Vibatam Kwa Cha Tat Tirohitam Yasvatmanidam Nijamayayapitam Kvachid Vibatam Kwa Cha Tat Tirohitam Avidha Drik Sakshi Ubhayam Tad Ikshate Avidha Drik Saksha Ubhayam Tad Ikshate Avidha Drik Sakshi Ubhayam Tad Ikshate Sa Atma Mulo Avatu Mam Parat Para Sa Atma Mulo Avatu Mam Parat Para Sa Atma Mulo Avatu Mam Parat Para Avidya Dik Sakshubhayam Tarikshate Sa Atma Mulo Vatuvang Parat Para Yasvatmanidam Nijamaya Yapitam Kvachit Vibatam Kvacha Tattirohitam Avidya Dikshakshubhayam Tarikshate Sa Atma Mulo Vatuvang Parat Para Vaishnavis. Yeah, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who? Who? Swa-atmani, in him. Idam, this cosmic manifestation. Nijamayaya, by his own potency. Arpitam, invested. Kvachit, sometimes. At the beginning of a kalpa. Vibhatam, it is manifested. Kvacha, sometimes, during dissolution. Tat, that, manifestation. Tirohitam, not visible. You familiar with this word? We have the tirabhav and the avirbhav of great souls. So tirohitam, not when someone's not visible. Doesn't mean they die or they cease to exist. It's just they're no longer visible. Avidhadrik, he sees everything in all these circumstances. Sakshi, the witness. Upayam, both manifestation and annihilation. Tat ikshate, sees everything without loss of sight. Sa, that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Atma Mula, self-sufficient, having no other cause. Avatu, please give protection. Mam, unto me. Parat para, he is transcendental to transcendental, or above all transcendence. So it's really, with these verses in the Bhagavatam and the translations given by Srila Prabhupada, we see there's no superfluous words, and all the words have so much meaning. Prabhupada mentioned this would often mention this actually in Bhagavatam class and things, how that each word of the Bhagavatam has so much meaning. And we see, with great souls like Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur, he gave class, because of his deep realizations, he could give class on one verse for 3 months. And you look at someone like Jiva Goswami. If you read Jiva Goswami's commentaries on the first 3 verses of the Bhagavatam, they're so extensive, and just in the first verse alone, he gets 5 completely different meanings from that verse. And so we see how, in every word here, you can see there's so much important meaning, just like this tirohitam, saying not visible. So when we talk about the avirbhav or the tirabhav of a great soul, we understand that they don't die. It's just the living entity is no longer in that body, and he's gone to another situation. And so you can see that even when we refer to what are commonplace events and activities in this world, that the philosophy is present in that description. That we are saying that actually the living entity doesn't die, as Krishna explains, it says, Najayate mriyate vakadachim nayam bhutva bhavata vana bhuya. That is, for the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, will not come into being. He is eternal, ever existing, primeval, not slain when the body is slain. So just with a simple one word like this, such a deep understanding is contained in that one expression. And then we see here another expression which is very interesting, is para. How the Lord is transcendental to transcendental. He's so transcendental, he's even above being transcendental. He's such a personality that he's above all transcendence. He's above everything. And in actuality, there is no way we can describe Krishna. It's just not possible. Because he is above all description. He is above all understanding. And we see here, as we go through these verses, you'll see how Gajendra is explaining that it's not possible to understand the Lord. And there's two other, actually many places, but there are two other prominent personalities which make this statement. We see in the, I think it's the, 13th chapter of the first canto, with the passing of Bhishmadev, and Krishna comes before him, and he offers prayers to Krishna. And then he's saying that, you cannot understand your acts. They're so bewildering to me. Everything you do is just so bewildering. And then again we see, or prior to that, we see in the 8th chapter of the first canto, this really nice verse from Kunti, which is Maya Javanikachanam, where she's saying how you are covered by the curtain of Maya. That even though she's seeing Krishna practically every day, she's interacting with Krishna on a personal level, still she's saying, I cannot understand you, I'm bewildered by your acts. And especially she's saying, when I see that that Mother Yasoda, I hear about this story of Mother Yasoda, she's chasing you with a stick, and you're running away and crying. You're God, and you're crying. I mean, I don't understand this at all. So for great souls like Bhishma and Kunti, who are experiencing prem, they don't understand Krishna. What hope does an ordinary living entity like myself have, or a conditioned living entity? What hope do they have? So we see here also, and this is one of the wonderful aspects of this pastime, is what happens is Gajendra, he's caught by this elephant, or the crocodile, he's the elephant, he's in an elephant's body. Previously he was Indradrumna. He's caught by a crocodile, and he's dragged into the water. He's sort of dragged deeper and deeper into the water. And then he realizes, I can't do anything about this. It's just, the power of this creature is beyond my capacity. And so then he takes this opportunity to surrender to the Lord. And we see that he offers these wonderful prayers. We'll talk a little bit about offering prayers in a minute. He offers these wonderful prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at the end, the Lord manifests. The Lord comes, at the end of this chapter, you'll see, I think it's about the third or fourth last verse, how the Lord appears there on Garuda, and he assesses the situation. He drags him out of the water, chops off the head of the crocodile, and Gajendra is just overwhelmed. And it describes in the last verse, or maybe it's the last verse, how he offered prayers with difficulty. Now, someone who's a mundane interpreter of these texts will think, oh, he's in difficulty because he was grabbed by the crocodile and he was dragged into the water and he's feeling a lot of pain and he's suffering and he's bleeding and all this kind of stuff, which is quite normal that someone who goes through that situation would experience that. It's like yourself when you go through some physically challenging situation, it's difficult to kind of gather your thoughts and to function afterwards. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains, he was experiencing difficulty because of prem, because of intense love for Krishna. He was finding it very difficult to articulate words. So it's, because we see that all throughout this chapter, he's offering these wonderful prayers and talking about the transcendental nature of the Lord, and yet at the end, he achieves perfection through this process of offering prayers. And so we see, Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto, he describes the 9 processes of devotional service in Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Parasevaramachanam bandhanam dasyam sakyam atmanivedam. And Prabhupada points out that you can perfect yourself by any one of these 9 processes or all of these 9 processes. And this is the wonderful thing about devotional service. There's a statement in the 22nd chapter, I think it is, of the Madhya Lila. It's also there in the probably chapter 13 of the Nectar of Devotion, the 5 most potent forms of devotional service, I think it's called. And we see in that chapter, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, how it's listing the 64 items of devotional service. Nectar of Devotion does the same. And then finally, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he talks about how the power of these 5 principles, this is Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Vasa Śrīmad Sevan. He's saying how the power of these 5 principles, or Sadhu Sangha means associating with devotees, studying the Bhagavatam, chanting the holy names, living in a holy place, and worshipping the deity with faith and veneration. So he's talking about the power of the process of these 5 principles. And he says the power of these 5 principles is what does he say? It's I can't remember, there's one word missing there, but he's saying it's very difficult to understand. And then he goes on to explain that this is Lord Chaitanya talking, that even if one is slightly connected with one of these principles, even if you have no faith, it's sufficient to reawaken your dormant love of Godhead. So that's the nature of the process of bhakti, that even if you're just a little bit connected with the process of bhakti, it's sufficient to rekindle that love of Godhead that's dormant within the heart. It's not that it comes from somewhere else. And this is also explained in the Gita. It says, Nitya Siddhi Krishna Prem Sarva Kavanai Shravanada Sutta Shiri. Kararai Sutta Chitte. Chitte means in the heart. Kararai Dai is awoken by this process of bhakti, especially by hearing and chanting. So we see here how Gajendra, he's in the form of an elephant. And an elephant's a pretty mode of ignorance kind of creature. You see the elephants that they had in Mayapur, they're not there anymore. But, very tiny little eyes and very, very big bodies, thick skin, And basically all they can think about is eating, and just, passing stool and things like that. They're not very aware creatures. And so here we see that Gajendra, previously in Nrsimha, he's in this body of an elephant. And yet, in this calamitous situation, by the mercy of Krishna, we have to understand this is directly by the mercy of Krishna, because how else could a living entity who's so deep in ignorance have remembrance of Krishna? How else could he be reciting these prayers? So it's the mercy of Krishna. And it's only by the mercy of Krishna that the living entity is able to achieve anything in this material world, especially coming to transcendence. It's only by the mercy of Krishna. And this is also pointed out in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, Brahmanda Brahmanje Kamana Bhagavanji, Guru Krishna Prasad Kripa Poi Bhakti Lata Bij. It's by the mercy of Krishna. He's saying how the living entities, they're wandering throughout the universe in the material world. They're going up and down through different verse in this world. But when one receives the mercy of Krishna, one gets Guru. And then by the mercy of Guru, one gets Krishna. So we can see how in order for someone to make progress in the spiritual path, you require mercy. And the beginning of that mercy is the mercy of Krishna. Only when we receive the mercy of Krishna can we come into contact with the spiritual path, and can we make progress on the spiritual path. This is being demonstrated here in this wonderful story. Prabhupada's purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has multi-potencies, Parasya Shakti Vivadaya Shriyate. Therefore, as soon as he likes, he uses one of his potencies, and by that expansion he creates this cosmic manifestation. Again, when the cosmic manifestation is annihilated, it rests in him. Nonetheless, he is infallibly the supreme observer. Under any circumstances, the Supreme Lord is changeless. He is simply a witness and is aloof from all creation and annihilation. So even though it's going on by his arrangement, he's actually not involved directly himself. It's only happening by his energies. As Prabhupada points out there, Parasya Shakti Vividaya Shruyate. He's got so many unlimited potencies. And these potencies, everything is happening by the agency of these potencies. The creation is going on, the annihilation is going on, the sustenance is going on. He only gets involved when someone takes the process of bhakti. Otherwise, he doesn't get involved. And you can see this. You can see the various material examples of this. Like there's a story of I think it's Akbar. One time he was walking through his garden and he was having a conversation with his minister Birbal. And because Birbal was a Vaishnava, whereas Akbar, as we know, was a follower of Islam, and he had didn't seem like he was very philosophically sort of aware. So he was talking about how, Birbal was talking about how sometimes the Lord comes down for his devotee. And Krishna says that, I mean, obviously Akbar was intellectually quite advanced, because otherwise he wouldn't be having such conversations. But then Birbal was explaining that to the emperor, and he was finding it difficult to accept. And then, so as he was walking through the garden, he noticed his grandson had fallen into a pond and was in the process of drowning. So Akbar, he stepped into the pond, and he pulled him out of the pond. And so Birbal used this as an opportunity to explain. It just seemed that you may say, you are the emperor of the world, but because this child is drowning, you step in there and save him, because of this tie of affection. So we see it's the same with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Generally, he doesn't get involved. He makes arrangements, he sends his representatives, he sends the holy name, the Shastras. He creates all these facility for the living entity to come back to him, but he doesn't get directly involved until the living entity turns to him. And then he, excuse me, and then he gets involved. Then he starts to take steps towards the living entity. And Prabhupada's father used to often explain to Prabhupada that if you take one step towards Krishna, he will take 10 steps towards you. If you offer with one hand, you offer things to Krishna. With his 10 hands, he will offer things to you. And if Krishna wants to take things from you, he takes with his 10 hands. What can you possibly hold on to with 2 hands? So we see how the Lord acts to reciprocate with his devotee. And sometimes we see with devotees, just like we see here with Gajendra, he became overwhelmed with love. So the reciprocation of the Lord is so powerful, so potent, that it's overwhelming for the devotees. And you see this, Dhruva Maharaj, same thing. He became overwhelmed. He was overwhelmed by it's just like when you meet sort of a great person. It's quite, can be quite powerful. But when you come into contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly, it's overwhelming. So much so that your sensory capacity shuts down, because it's just I don't know. It's just like say for instance you have a fire, right? And if you're slowly adding fuel, the fire gets bigger and bigger. But if all of a sudden you were to pour on, if you had a small fire burning here and you poured onto that fire 100 gallons of gasoline, the fire would go out, because it'd just be too much for it to get off, because the fire needs oxygen to function. Without the oxygen, it won't burn. So, in a similar way, with us, because of our limited capacity, because of our limited senses, our limited ability to process information, when we meet with someone, or when we meet with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this is overwhelming. And this is what we see happens here with Gajendra, you see it happening with Dhruva, you see it in so many situations. When people have this awareness of this is God, then they just become overwhelmed. And similarly it happens with Arjuna when he's on the Balakurukshetra. In the 10th chapter, the 11th chapter, when he gets this awareness of Krishna, he sees Krishna's potency, he just becomes completely overwhelmed by that. And then he's saying, my Lord, I've lost all equilibrium, please help me to restore this. And so this is the nature, as saying here, this para, how Krishna is just beyond everything. You cannot actually, Krishna is so great, you cannot conceive, you cannot rationalize how great he is. Because no material descriptions are adequate. Because you look, he says at the end of the 10th chapter, you should know that all these glorious and wonderful creations, they spring from but a spark of my splendor. So it's just like, here in Australia, we commonly get these massive bushfires. And so, they burn out, tens of thousands of acres of land. And if you take one of those bushfires, you just take a spark out of that bushfire. Comparatively, you could think this is like this whole material creation in comparison to Krishna. That spark is the whole material creation in comparison to Krishna's splendor, in comparison to Krishna's potency. So it's not possible. We can give some analogies or some examples to try and get a sense of what Krishna's like, but we can never really understand it because it is just so vast. There is no way of comprehending that. And also, with our limited perception, we can only perceive finite things. But Krishna is infinite. There is no limit to his glories. There is no limit to his potency. He is constantly expanding. And we cannot conceive of that. Something that's just constantly expanding. How do you understand? It's not possible. So this is some of the points that are being made here in this verse. And also we see something that's really interesting here in this chapter, how what happened was previously, in a previous life, Indradyumna had learnt these prayers that he's reciting right now. And then what happens is, by the mercy of Krishna, he's remembering those prayers. These prayers are coming back into his consciousness. Why? Why do they come back into his consciousness? It's because they're transcendental prayers. They're glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the first verse here, Prabhupada mentions about learning prayers. And it's kind of interesting because I remember years ago, I was in the Brahmachari ashram here. I was mixing up tilak in my hand. I was Lalate Keshavam Jaya, chanting that prayer. And this older devotee comes in and says, "Why are you wasting your time with this rubbish? Just chant Hare Krishna. That's all you need to do." Okay, fine. And anyhow, so later on, and I've had several experiences over the years where devotees have said, "You don't need any other mantra. You just chant Hare Krishna," and that's not incorrect. Yet, if we analyze that situation, how many of us can just chant Hare Krishna and be satisfied? The mind is satisfied, the senses is peaceful, the senses are peaceful. How many can do that? Can you think of anyone who can do that? Huh? Thakur Haridas can do that. He just chanted Hare Krishna, 24 hours a day practically. And he was peaceful, he was happy, he was blissful. There's so much so that when he was confronted with what would, for a normal person, would be a very tempting situation, he wasn't tempted because he was completely absorbed in the holy name of the Lord. And so it's a rare person that can be satisfied simply to chant the holy name. So we see in the first verse how Prabhupada explains in the purport how we should all learn different prayers. I remember years ago that His Holiness Mahavishnu Swami had encouraged me to learn Brahma's prayers for creative energy from the beginning of the third canto. And I've tried, but it's a lot of verses there. But they're very amazing prayers. Very amazing prayers. And Prabhupada's making the point that we should all learn different prayers, like the Brahma Samhita, like the Nrsimha Stotra, all these different types of things, because they will help us. If we don't complete or perfect our Krishna consciousness in this life, and we're forced to take birth again, these prayers will come back because they're transcendental. They're not mundane prayers. They'll come back into our consciousness at some point, and we'll remember those prayers, and we'll recite those prayers to Krishna. And these can, as we see here with Gajendra, these can bring about our salvation. So this is none of these stories, as I was saying before in the Bhagavatam, nothing in the Bhagavatam is superfluous. Everything has its purpose. We just need to understand what it is. And that's the challenge, is sometimes because our consciousness is so dull. Why are these types of stories? Why are we talking about an elephant? Huh? He's just a dumb animal. But it so happens that in his previous birth, he was, Nrsimha, a great devotee of the Lord who actually built the temple in Jagannath, who was such a great devotee, that he was having, these interactions with the Lord. Narad Muni came down, he built this wonderful temple, installed the deities of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, and then somehow by some arrangement of fate, he winds up becoming an elephant. But it's not an accidental thing. It's actually this Krishna's internal potency. It's the Yoga Maya who's arranging this, because what happens, we see, Prabhupada would say sometimes, a Bengali saying is palena parichiyate. You judge the thing by the result. So, why is this king becoming an elephant? Because it's Krishna's, he's participating in Krishna's pastimes. He's such a great devotee. He's so surrendered to the Lord that Krishna's making this arrangement so he can demonstrate the importance of chanting these different types of verses, especially Jhan mantras, and mantras where you're meditating on the form, you're meditating on the dham, and these stotras or stutis where you're glorifying the activities of the personality of Godhead. And you'll see each one of these prayers has so much meaning to it. How Gajendra is, and it's like about 40 different prayers he's chanting, and all of these prayers are explaining different aspects of the personality of Godhead. And even though in the beginning it seems like he's a kanista, because he's approaching Krishna for material reasons, because he wants to save me, pahimam, pahimam. Yet we see by the end of it, because of his prayers, because of his deep devotion, he actually develops prema. So it's a very wonderful pastime. We see how Krishna manifests these different occurrences just to teach us very, very important lessons. And we see with Gajendra how, in the previous 2 chapters, how he was so attached to his family, to enjoying with his family, to material facilities, etc. Yet, this is a testament to his greatness, is that when he was confronted with a difficult situation, he remembered Krishna. And this is also we see with the Devatas, even though they seem to be quite materialistic at times, still, whenever they're confronted with calamities, they don't take shelter of their own capacity. You'll see people in this material world, when they're confronted with calamities, they take shelter of their intelligence, of their physical strength, of their relatives. But Prahlad Maharaj refers to these as these fallible soldiers, because they're all fallible, because they're all destined to perish. So your intelligence will perish, your strength will perish, your relatives will perish. What's the point of taking such shelter of such temporary things? There is only one thing to take shelter, and that's Krishna. Because Krishna, as is being described here, he's infallible. He's above all transcendence. He's above all material concepts. He's above creation and destruction. Therefore, an intelligent person takes shelter of Krishna. There's no point taking shelter of anything else. And if we take shelter of Krishna, then we will achieve perfection in life. But if we take shelter of material energy, it will just lead to bondage in this material world. Further bondage, or deepen our bondage. So, the story of Gajendra is demonstrating to us the benefit of taking shelter of Krishna. And actually, not just the benefit, but actually showing us that this is the only person to take shelter of, because no one but Krishna can save us. And we see how when the Lord saw this situation, he heard the prayers of Gajendra, immediately he came and said he came there in a suitable time. So he came there just in perfect time to, Gajendra was able to give his heartfelt prayers, to give his heartfelt feelings about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And just before it all became a little bit too much, Krishna appeared there, dragged him out of the water, killed the crocodile. So very, very, very wonderful story. Okay, any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, sir, thank you for the class. And here is going to the pastime of Gajendra, and although he was a great devotee, but because of his forgetfulness, that he has sort of fallen down, and now he's, by Krishna's mercies, that he's remembering him again. So, in our engagement in Krishna consciousness, we're trying to be sincere and we are prayerful that we don't forget Krishna and don't lose the association of devotees. But we see many instances where devotees who are trying to do that sincerely, but then somehow the Maya sort of grabs hold of them and takes them away. Sometimes for a very short time, sometimes it can be quite a long time. So for our own protection, like although we're trying our best to sincerely chant and pray and associate with the devotees, what are some of the steps that we can take now that will protect us?
Yeah, I mean, one time Prabhupada was praying to the deities. It's kind of like your question is multifaceted and the answer is multifaceted. It's not just like a black and white answer. You go, oh, if you do this, you'll be protected. It's not like that. And that's not the nature of devotional service. Devotional service is so multifaceted. There's so many different angles, on these things. One time Prabhupada was standing before the deities and he was offering prayers. One of the devotees said to Prabhupada, what were you praying for? He says, I was praying to Krishna to protect me so I never fall down. And the devotee was bewildered. It's like, but you're Prabhupada, you can't fall down. And Prabhupada explained, it's because I'm always praying to the deities to protect me, I can never fall down. So the thing is to always be absorbed in thought of Krishna. And this is no mean feat. It's quite an achievement to be always absorbed in thought of Krishna because we're constantly being attacked by the material nature. We're constantly being attacked by our past conditioning. These things are constantly there. There's no real kind of easy answer to such a question, because the idea is just whatever your attraction is or your impetus is in devotional service, take that and use that to become more and more absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Whatever it is, just like, I teach deity worship. So I use that, I try to learn more about deity worship, I try to understand the topic more deeply so that I can inspire others in deity worship. So for me it's an absorption. And so somehow or other become absorbed in the process of bhakti. Maybe it's book distribution for you. I don't know. But whatever it is, try to become absorbed. But at the same point, and one of the tendencies we have, especially as younger devotees, is we become somewhat fanatical. And in that fanatical approach, we may disrespect devotees. This is very dangerous. And so we have to be mindful of the pitfalls that can be there if we don't have a broader vision. So, sadhu sangha, very, very important to associate with devotees. And we should see all devotees as sadhus, not just, sannyasis and things like that. We should see all devotees as sadhus because they're all trying to surrender to Krishna according to their capacity. And it may vary. Just like I went out to a lunch the other day to a devotee's house, and they were saying, well, what about us? We see people in the temple, they do this, that, and we can't do the same. But this thing is this International Society for Krishna Consciousness is described how by an astrologer. Prabhupada was described as being that person who built a house in which the whole world can live. So, but that doesn't mean that we're all going to be on the same level, we're all going to practice bhakti in the same way, we're all going to have the same realizations. It's very, very broad. And so we're all going to be at our own individual level of realization and advancement in Krishna consciousness. And also what we find inspiring is going to be different because we're all individuals. So what's going to work for you will be somewhat different from what's going to work for me. It'll have the same basic elements, but it'll be different. So you need to find in Krishna consciousness what inspires you to surrender to Krishna more and more, and take shelter of that, and develop that, and develop your own practice. And then just, associate nicely with devotees. This we should always cling on to the lotus feet of devotees. And by clinging onto their lotus feet, because they're on the path back to Godhead, we cling onto their feet, we automatically go back to Godhead. So, yeah, association of devotees is a key. Sadhu Sangha Shava Shastra Koi Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha Sava Siddhohai. Yeah. It's the verdict of all the revealed scriptures. Sava Shastra, all the revealed scriptures say the same thing. That even by a moment's association with a great devotee, one can achieve all success. So, but associating with devotees doesn't just mean hanging out with them. It means, we inquire from them, we get their instructions, we follow the instructions, we honor prasad with them, we give gifts, we receive gifts. It's all these different exchanges are very, very important. So we don't just hang out and shoot the breeze and whatever, but we have particular types of interactions with the devotees, but always, we should be very respectful of devotees. This is a key to making progress in devotional service. Anything else? Yes, Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the nice class. You mentioned how only by the mercy of Krishna could Gajendra remember his past life.
Say a little slowly.
You mentioned how Lord Krishna, by only Lord Krishna's mercy, could Gajendra remember his past life prayers, and he could remember Krishna at the time of difficulty. But we see in our case, we are born in a devotee. We take birth in a devotee family because in our past life we were devotees. Yeah. So even if we don't do devotional service, will Krishna help us at the time of difficulty? Because we see Gajendra, he did not do any devotional service.
But just like, for the fact that you're born in a devotee family, this is evidence you were a devotee in a past life. But there's an interesting statement by Rupa Goswami. I think it's the second chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, he points out that you'll see people, they come to Krishna consciousness and they progress quite quickly to a certain level, then they start to flatten out and it takes longer. So he explains how this is proof that in their past life they were devotees. And you see this, that many people who come to devotional service, it's evident that they previously practiced devotional service. Just like I know in my own case, I must have been a Brahmana in a previous life, because when I got Gayatri Diksha, I chanted the mantra 9 times and I knew it. So it's obvious that was already there in my consciousness. And we see with most people, you see that there must, you can only come to devotional service from past life practice. But then Rupa Goswami, he goes on to say, but how do then people come to devotional service if they haven't had past life practice? He said, only by the association of pure devotee. So we can see like with Srila Prabhupada, we see he had such a massive impact. Tens of thousands of people came to Krishna consciousness. He was, like one time Giriraj Maharaj was asking a question. He said, Prabhupada was talking about piety. He said, but Srila Prabhupada, how can I come to devotional service? I had no pious activity. He said, I am making your pious activity. So this is the impact of the pure devotee. But now we've all practiced devotional service in previous lives, and we're practicing it now. So we just have to keep at it, keep connected to the process of bhakti. And Prabhupada makes the point that if we are determined to give this life to Krishna and to practice devotional service, even if we have some shortcomings, at the time of death, Lord Chaitanya will force his way into your consciousness. And we've seen this, so many times there's devotees who, Prabhupada disciples who gave years of their life to Prabhupada, and for one reason or another have gone away. And at the time of death, they have a Krishna conscious experience. We shouldn't count on that happening, but my point is that Krishna is not some mean person. You give years and years of your life to serving Krishna, then you go away and say, oh, bad luck, see you later. It's not like that. Krishna, it's like everything you do is noted. Everything you do in the process of bhakti is noted, and at the time of death, this is all counted. And so we should never think that we'll be abandoned. But don't use this as an excuse not to pursue devotional service, because you could in this life you go up to 5% and then you give up devotional service. Why stop at 5%? Why not go to 100%? Yeah? There's no reason to stop. So yeah, just some reflections on your question.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Anything else? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thanks for the class. You mentioned that the demigods always take shelter of the Lord, but whereas like most materialistic people, they take shelter of their strength or their knowledge.
Yeah.
So what makes some living entities take shelter of the Lord and some living entities not?
There's a difference between a theist and an atheist. That's really what it is. Someone who's a theist, even though they may not be very advanced in devotional service, they accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so in these circumstances, they'll take shelter of God. But an atheist denies the existence of God. And we see this is described clearly in the Bhagavad Gita and many, many places throughout the Bhagavatam. The atheist is only, he denies the existence of God and thinks that Ishwaraham aham bhogi siraham, but by my power, I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer, I'm powerful, I'm happy. By my power, I've conquered all these people. This one's my enemy, I'll kill him. That's their mentality. And you get to see this in the neighborhood here sometimes, with some of the neighbors who are not very nice. They have this atheistic tendency. And they don't accept that, here are the devotees trying their best to surrender to Krishna. They much prefer to criticize and to complain and to create trouble. They have this atheistic tendency. And this is why they don't surrender to Krishna. They never will, until they give up their atheistic tendency. And Krishna says that in the Gita, that 4 types of people don't surrender to me. And so those who partake of the atheistic nature of demons are one of those types of people. So when people have this atheistic nature, it's very difficult to accept Krishna. This is Duryodhana. He couldn't accept Krishna as God. Even though God was standing before him, manifesting one of his universal forms, he couldn't accept that this was God. Because he was convinced of his power. He was convinced that he was the all-powerful person. Hiranyakashipu, exactly the same thing. Why are you surrendering God? You should surrender to me. So don't become an atheist. Not a good place to be. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.